that we might have just missed that someone else won another huge position battle.
Iowa football gets their guy, 5-star defensive lineman Yosei Epinesa.
It looks like no Big Ten expansion before 2026.
Or can Eric Bieniemy, Ethan Garbers, and the UCLA offense have something to say about a potential 7 to 8 win season?
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
It looks like no Big Ten expansion before 2026.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference.
The August 15th deadline for ACC schools to announce that they would be leaving the ACC hypothetically and realigning with another conference has come and gone. And since we think a natural landing spot for many of those schools, like Florida State, for example, would be the Big Ten, all should be quiet and status quo for the 2025 season. We always keep an eye on that stuff. Unless, of course, Notre Dame decides that they want to join next year, since it is presumed they have an open invitation to join the big time anywhere, anytime. And as an independent, they do not have to adhere to another conference and its rules and its buyout clauses totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. And while I don't think that'll happen in time for 2025, if I may just go off on a side tangent for just a moment. If you are new to this podcast, I do think ultimately Notre Dame will have to give up its dream of remaining independent, and they'll have to join a conference once the mandatory revenue sharing plan is implemented following the House versus NCAA verdict, which each major school will then be forced to pay athletes from past, present, and future to the tune of $22 million a year. Now, I know Notre Dame is a wealthy school, but even rich schools are going to have to look under the cushions for a few coins here and there and pull together $22 million of a line item on the athletic budget each and every year for the next 10 years. That's a lot of money. So the best way for a school like Notre Dame to do that is to jump to a more lucrative TV contract like the one that the Big Ten has. And yes, I know Notre Dame has a decent TV contract, but it's not as good as the Big Tens or the SECs for that matter. And an extra $22 million expense is an extra $22 million expense. So I think they will have to do something. But anyway, I digress. That's for you guys who might be new to our podcast. You everydayers know how I feel about this. But let's go back to the ACC schools for a moment. That will be on the move eventually. Primarily Florida State and Clemson, who are in the middle of a lawsuit in an attempt to get out of the ACC and out from under the lowball long-term media rights deal through 2036. Now, these lawsuits and countersuits have been going on all year. This is nothing new. It's well documented here on Locked On Big Ten. But with this August 15th deadline coming and going now, we should mention, and did mention 2 days ago, that mediation between Florida State and Clemson and the ACC began this week. In fact, it was ordered by one of the judges in one of the lawsuits, and he gave a certain window of about 120 days to get it going, and we're coming up on that. So they've started mediation because the judge has told it to, and they're coming up on that deadline as well. So where are we today? All right, the lawsuits between Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC and the countersuits, they all continue. No settlement has been reached this summer, as we were keeping an eye out for that possibility all summer long. Mediation has begun to search for a compromise between all parties involved. And the August 15th deadline means that Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC will remain intact at least through the 2025 season, the 2024 season, and the 2025 season. There are now 2 more dates that we need to keep an eye on in the future. Naturally, August 15th, 2025, a year from now. Everything moves forward a year. August 15th, 2025 will be the next deadline for ACC schools to announce their intentions of leaving for another conference in time for the 2026 season. By then, any ongoing mediations that are just now getting underway or any settlement that may or may not be in the works should be reached by then. You would think some kind of solution could or should be in the works as we move along. We've got a little breathing room, if you will. You would think. Before that, though, there's a little bit of a wild card in all of this, and I'm going to jump back into it. We've discussed this at length here before. Some of you are pretty good on this stuff and pretty smart on this stuff, because I can tell from the comments that you guys leave that you're pretty well versed on what I'm about to talk about. In February of 2025, that's 6 months from now, ESPN has a look-in clause in this media rights deal with the ACC that goes on until 2036. And of course, obviously, this deal through 2036 has not aged very well when you compare it to the big money that the Big Ten and the SEC has procured in the meantime. So this look-in clause was put in to assess the current marketplace mid-contract. And obviously, it's out of whack. Now, ESPN could kill this deal by 2027 out of the goodness of its heart, and that would make the ACC schools very happy. But this is a great deal for ESPN. I mean, financially, why wouldn't they want to keep paying virtually nothing to its member schools and have a product to air on its network and pay as little as money as possible between now and 2036 to carry these schools and their games on TV? But ESPN also has a product that it wants to see flourish. What good would it do ESPN to have the ACC rights if the ACC blows up and people say, the heck with it, I'm just going to pay my way out of here? And now you got nothing left. How valuable of a product is the ACC going to be for ESPN if, for example, SMU, Duke, Stanford, and Cal are your premier products because everybody else is left? That's not going to be any good. And in fact, at that point, ESPN may actually be overpaying its rights money to schools like that. No offense. So maybe, just maybe, ESPN will allow for some flexibility to appease its member schools. Maybe. This is a big wild card. Again, February 2025. But the problem is, they're not going to still, even under the best case scenarios, they're not going to just all of a sudden start paying ACC schools the kind of money that the Big Ten or the SEC schools are getting paid for their media deals. Florida State thinks of itself as a premier football program, and they should. And it really bugs them to see Rutgers and Northwestern and Indiana and Purdue making $70 to $100 million a year as these deals age compared to what they're getting stuck in the ACC as a football powerhouse. They don't like it. It doesn't sit well with them. That's why they want to get out. And they've stated that they want to get out of the ACC. They made that very, very clear. So here's the other thing. Once one or two teams leave, it's over. It's over. This whole thing, the ACC is going to blow up. I mean, just look at the Pac-12 as Exhibit A. That's all you need to see. I mean, when some of their marquee schools started leaving, the rest went like that. And then there were just two left. That's what's going to happen to the ACC. Mark my words. It's just a matter of when. One or two departures, it sets in panic mode for everybody. It's like a sell-off. Schools scrambling, trying to find a home in a mega million of dollars version of musical chairs is what it really is. But things seem to be quiet for now. 2024, 2025, status quo.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, WNBA back soon, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Is there any point in betting on anyone in the AFC West besides the Chiefs? FanDuel has the Chiefs minus 230 to win the AFC West. If you want to bet on another team in that division, the Chargers are the next closest to the Chiefs at plus 350. The Raiders, they're 9-1, and the Broncos, well, they're just happy to be here. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Iowa football gets their guy, five-star defensive lineman Yosei Epinesa.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Five-star defensive lineman Yosei Epinesa has committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, this is a commitment. There is no signing that has happened. That has to wait until December. But as he gets ready for his final season on the football field down in Edwardsville, Illinois, this is a huge coup. You know, you look at the recruitment of Epinesa this season. And of course, his brother AJ, his dad Epi, those guys, former Hawkeyes. His brother is a walk-on, Eric, right now with the football program. Yosei, though, is going through things much differently than AJ. And though AJ, we're not talking about a brother that's decades older or anything like that, the environment that Yosei has gone through is just completely different than what AJ had to go through. And the biggest impact of that is obviously NIL and the financial component that goes along with it. As we've said in the past, the Iowa football program and Iowa athletics as a whole, as it pertains to the Swarm Collective and the NIL game, look, they're not last. They're certainly not first. They're somewhere in the middle. They're comfortable, but in order to compete with the highest level, still a lot more work needs to be done in that. But we're not talking about a program that is going to be decimated year in and year out by programs coming in and being able to pluck away their top talent. Now, when it comes to high school recruiting, we're talking about a different element. And some of the finalists that were involved for Yosei Epinesa, you start with Utah. A lot of connections with his background, a lot of Polynesian players that are on that program, maybe a more comfortable environment just with his background. That was a component there. Also, some coaches that did a lot of good work and had some background with the family. Then Miami, the financial component was huge there. The financial component with what Miami was able to deliver and what they could do with the financial package is unlike anything out of his finalists that were there. Eventually, though, home won out. And the other one that we hadn't talked a ton about, but it sounded like listening to Tom Caker from Hawkeye Report, he had mentioned that Yosei Epinesa sounded like it was down to Penn State and Iowa. Eventually chose the Hawkeyes. This is a big coup. I mean, you look at obviously the recruiting list, and it goes deeper than just the programs that we mentioned. Penn State, Utah, Miami, Missouri was up there towards the end. But this is a guy that had offers from Arkansas, Auburn, Colorado, Illinois, Iowa State, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ole Miss, Oregon, Tennessee, Texas, USC, Washington. I mean, when you're talking about that kind of offer list, and how many more would have there been maybe if he didn't have the family connections that he did to Iowa? Were there some programs out there that just decided, look, we know it's not worth the investment because they believe ultimately that he was going to do what he did, and that is commit to the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, he is a bigger player, certainly than AJ was at this time. You look at the recruiting profiles. Now, Yosei is probably a good 30, 40 pounds bigger than AJ was going into his senior year of high school. We know what a stud AJ was coming in right away, what he was able to do and be an impact player right away. Now, you wonder eventually, is Yosei Epinesa going to be a guy that plays inside defensive tackle? Look, if he continues to add more weight and goes from 270 pounds now and gets up to that 300-pound range, yes, he's going to be moving inside. He's going to be a defensive tackle in the Iowa scheme. Or are they going to be working to keep him on the outside? Is that something that they're going to be able to do with the power and the quickness that he has and go that route? Listed at 6'4", 270 pounds already at 24/7. 24/7 Sports, in fact, has him rated as the 16th player in the country, number 16 overall, number 3 defensive lineman, and the number 1 interior defensive lineman in the country. The composite ranking, which puts all the recruiting rankings together out there, 42nd in the country, the 5th defensive lineman, and still the number 1 interior defensive lineman. I mean, absolutely huge what Iowa was able to do and what they were able to deliver, bringing in Yosei Epinesa now and really adding to this class. You look at the rankings and the way that things have jumped up now for Iowa after getting the commit from Yosei Epinesa, really moves them up in the rankings, and something that you definitely want to see what they have in this class, a class that now will have their headliner in Epinesa. They have got the commitment already from a couple other top-level prospects. We talked a lot about Thomas Meyer, the tight end from Clear Lake, another 4-star at Rivals, 4-star at 24/7. Lucas Allgaier, who I'm really excited about him, the offensive tackle from St. Louis. Now, people still wonder what his position is going to be. If it is offensive tackle, let's make that happen. Let's get back to having a great tackle. Some of the other headliners there, Joey Van Wetsinga, his older brother, a walk-on with the football team, playing at the fullback spot. Jimmy Sullivan, the quarterback in this class. Mason Woods, we've talked about him. Really an interesting classes that are all kind of put together and the way that they're going to look coming up this season. And with that, we will dig deeper into things. Mentioned a couple of the different recruiting sites out there and the way that they look at the Iowa Hawkeyes this season. Up to 37th now in the country with the Jose Epinesa, with his connection. 11th in the Big Ten. That one was a little bit interesting to me, but excited about this group, excited about getting the commitment. Certainly big news in the world of Iowa Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Balls, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers.
What do we hear? Of course, media did not get to see any of the scrimmage, but what did we hear? What were some of the bigger takeaways from Tennessee's scrimmage on a Thursday morning? First big takeaway, Nico Iamaleava did not play. Woke up, reportedly woke up, according to some sources to VolQuest, woke up, a little sick on a Thursday morning and just had the stomach bug. Didn't practice. He's human too, right? He is not injured. It is okay. Do not freak out. No conspiracy theorist here. He was sick Thursday morning, so he didn't scrimmage. There's no quarterback competition. Sure, you'd love for him to be out there, but at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal, in my opinion. So Nico did not play. What that meant was Gaston Moore and Jake Merkmiller got a lot of reps, more reps than they're accustomed to, and that's good. You hope nothing ever happens to Nico. Don't get me wrong. You hope nothing ever happens to Nico, but football is a contact sport, and so if something were to happen to Nico for an extended period of time, both of those guys would play. I don't think they would go with just one Gaston or one Jake. I think both of those guys would play. So, getting those guys some more and more experience, I think is never a bad thing. The offense responded. The offense took care of the football. I don't believe there were any takeaways. I'm not 100% sure, but I talked to some people who were in attendance and said, hey, the offense responded despite Nico not being out there. Offense looked more in rhythm. Offense looked good. So, whoa, Nico got something to work. No, I'm just kidding. Nico's going to be just fine. I think a lot of that had to do with Lance Hurd scrimmaged in this football game. Andre Carrick made an appearance in this, this scrimmage. Brew McCoy, who I am absolutely shocked Brew McCoy scrimmaged, but Brew McCoy apparently scrimmaged. He could scrimmage. He's fine. But I thought that the first time he would get hit would be against UTC. But Brew McCoy's out there, and finally, I guess he won out in that argument trying to get on the football field where the trainers and the coaches were trying to keep him off. Dude's a competitor. He didn't want to miss any time. And so Brew McCoy scrimmaged in this football game. So my point is, I don't believe John Campbell did, or I'm not sure if John Campbell did. I just heard Lance Hurd and Andre Carrick and Brew made some returns at the field. Dante Thornton practiced for Tennessee. Mike Matthews practiced for Tennessee. Dante Thornton caught a 60-yard touchdown pass from Gaston Moore. Dante Thornton apparently had the best day of any wide receiver. And that's really, really good because, again, he was turning the corner last year. And I was talking to J.D. Piquel off air, not in our conversation you're about to hear. We've talked many, many times about Dante Thornton. I was all in last year on Dante Thornton. Obviously, it did not turn out the way that we thought it would last year. But he turned the corner a little bit towards the end of last year. In spring, he was the best player on the field. And then in fall camp, he's been banged up a little bit, kind of eased his way back into action. So to see him, to hear that he had a really, really good day, that's awesome because I feel like that he's a guy that's going to make a lot of plays for Tennessee this year. But he had a really, really strong day. So heard that Deshaun Bishop was actually mentioned by name from Josh Heupel. Shout out to Adam Sparks of Knox News for flat out just saying Josh Heupel does not like to give anything away, and it's a game sometimes, but there's nothing wrong with praising who played well in a scrimmage. So Adam Sparks literally said, will you please name some offensive skill players who played well in the scrimmage today? and Josh Heupel, he mentioned Deshaun Bishop. He mentioned Peyton Lewis, said that they did a really good job running at the running back spot. Wide receivers, he mentioned Dante Thornton played extremely well. Said Squirrel White played well. He thought the tight end group as a whole, all three of those guys played extremely well today. So he mentioned a couple of those skill players who played well. So Dante Thornton was mentioned a couple of times. Squirrel White, Deshaun Bishop continues to have a strong camp, and I'll have an article about him over at On3 at some point here today on a Friday. But he met with the media a couple of days ago. He's a young guy. I think I spoke about this on yesterday's show. he's going to play a lot of football for Tennessee. In fact, I think to start the season, he's going to be RB2 behind Dylan Sampson. So really, really rooting for him. And he's, again, had a really strong fall camp. So that's good to hear. So it sounds like the offense overall, had a clean, was crisp. Welcome back some of those guys that we were talking about yesterday that needed to, perform and needed to show back up. And it sounded like the offense looked more like a Tennessee offense. Heard the receivers had a really, really good day. So those were all some great things. Think Gasson Moore and both Jake Marklinger, but Gasson Moore specifically, think that he managed the scrimmage very, very well and threw the ball where he needed to, made the right checks, and that's exactly what you want in a fifth-year guy. Defensively, it's not the defense played bad, absolutely. I think the defense flashed at certain spots. I think Joshua Josephs is a name that I heard a couple of times. Arian Carter at linebacker, who didn't play in the first scrimmage, he flashed a couple of times. Heard Jeremiah Thielander made some plays. I heard that Boo Carter and Christian Harrison played a lot of the star position and were rotating a lot. So, again, even if Boo Carter's not at their snap number one, Boo Carter's going to play a ton of star for this football team as a true freshman. So I think that's important to remember. Didn't hear much about the safeties, I got to be honest with you. Didn't hear much about Will Brooks or Jacoby Thomas or John Slaughter battling for that safety spot, aside from opposite of Andre Turrentine. But those are some of the notes that I heard about the linebackers. Let's see here. Yeah, Keenan Peely was held out of the scrimmage. I assumed that he would be. Ricky Gibson did not scrimmage. As we mentioned on yesterday's show, got a little bit of a sore hamstring. Jordan Matthews and Jalen McMurray were those cornerbacks who are rotating in opposite of Jamal McCoy. And so, yeah, I didn't hear much about the defense, I'm going to be honest with you, but I heard that the offense looked better. So that's what you want to hear. I mean, you heard a lot about the defense in scrimmage number 1, heard a lot about the offense in scrimmage number 2. Those are your 2 scrimmages. You go into a mock game week next week, and then the next week it is game week. So that's really, really, really good stuff to hear. So Tennessee's just rolling right along in fall camp. Scrimmage 2 is out of the way. No more scrimmages. There'll be a little bit more of 11-on-11 work, but they're going to start transitioning into game week type situations here next week and, of course, the week after that. So not a whole lot of notes. Sorry, guys, I wasn't there. Can only go on what people send to you and people hear and tell you. I did hear from someone that was there. They did a lot of special teams, and Jackson Ross is going to be a weapon. And I responded, well, buddy, that's not going to move the needle on my show. But I did want to point out that Jackson Ross apparently had a really, really good day. Quote, he was passing to the gunners down the field with his right leg and left leg, meaning he was punting the ball and the gunners are going and catching it in midair. That means a lot of hang time. So that's awesome, especially when you're doing traditional style, rugby style, all that type of stuff with both legs. So Jackson Ross apparently had a really, really good day. So
GameTime makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the GameTime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code LOCKEDON. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase with GameTime. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Or can Eric Bieniemy, Ethan Garbers, and the UCLA offense have something to say about a potential 7 to 8 win season?
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins.
It's a foregone conclusion, right? The UCLA team this year is going to be led offensively rather than they were defensively. Well, you would think leaning into the Chip Kelly era, that's how it's been. But in a more stunning reversal, a twist of fate of sorts, UCLA had a bowling season, had a good season last year. I know there were some very frustrating moments, but the brightest moments were the defense. In 2024, with Akika Malloy using transfers, limited use guys, it's going to be the defense, and Akika Malloy is going to have to be creative with a Danton-led philosophy, while UCLA has Eric Bieniemy leading the charge with a veteran quarterback, trying to surprise a Big Ten team. Because the staple of the Big Ten Conference, physicality, strong defenses, Iowa can't beat you scoring the football, but they can beat you because they won't let you score any points. That was the joke in recent years. Penn State, an even greater version of that because they couldn't do anything against Michigan. And what did Michigan have to do? All they had to do was run the football against the team in Penn State, and they beat them, right? So the idea is physicality and overall big-time defense is going to win. Then why did Washington State find ways to beat Wisconsin, right? Why did the most recent Ohio State-Oregon matchup go to Oregon? Why did, and the list goes on and on. Okay, and now that's not everything. Those are old Pac-12 teams or current Pac-12 teams going into a new Big Ten era, conference realignment era. But UCLA last year, if you look at total offensive numbers, I believe if you go on a compare and contrast, 24/7 Sports put this up, UCLA would have been the 5th best in an 18-team conference if you go by year-to-year models in offense. Would have been the 5th best team in offense. And with the eye test, you look at UCLA, and that was a pretty poor offensive showing last year for UCLA and a Chip Kelly offense. Not the biggest and beefiest up front, couldn't really control the line of scrimmage, still found ways to run the football, had freshman quarterback mistakes, had veterans still being a little shaky, had quarterback injuries, not a lot of depth, it seemed like, because they were trying to figure out which running back to use, but by the time the season came in and came to an end, clear top end running back, top end quarterback. You've got a talented receiving group that looks even better than last year with almost the same group, healthier, and a transfer or two with some incoming freshmen. And then you've got a tight end and Matsuval ready to break out, right? So this is a team where, stacked against the numbers, I think UCLA could make some noise. Now, is it 7-8 wins? Is it down to 4-3? That's the battle. But remember, you've got a loud, feisty offensive coordinator who I think is coming at the right time, right? Of course, Chip Kelly was going to call plays. Nothing was ever going to change that. Well, in a day and age where you've got so much turnover, so much to try and implement, a lot of the youth offensively is not going to play, right? It's not a team that's filled with freshmen, sophomores. No, you've got Sturdivant, who's been around college football, right? You've got Titus Mokiao-Atamalalo, who's been around college football. These guys have been around since spring, large in part. Garbers has been in the UCLA system, learned a new system now with Eric Bieniemy and the West Coast offense, which gives him more control. And it's easier doing that with the redshirt senior quarterback than it would have been with the true freshman, a true sophomore, a Garbers who hadn't been through the fight last year to earn his spot through 1, 2, 3 quarterback battles within an individual year, with let alone the injuries and poor, protection, pass protection against the blitz last year, and a rigidly stubborn coach that wouldn't give him a second opportunity. And I was hard to do that too as well, but still, he's been through it all. So when it comes to a guy who can be a vocal leader, a loud head coach who, if you go back to April in the LA Times article, you had the quote of Bieniemy screaming at his team, if you don't know the snap count, get off the bleeping field, right? Because we know Bieniemy is going to make sure the players know what's going on. And this is a team last year that, when you look at UCLA overall, I think they were close to a top 30 overall offense in the country. Then when you looked at passing numbers, UCLA fell back down to the 60th mark in the country. You take out the game against North Carolina Central because Dante Moore literally in the first play of the game threw a 70-yard pass to a wide open receiver. Then they go back down to 60, mid-60s. If you look at numbers when it comes to some of the better total offenses, but a team overall offense passing wise. And yes, the Bruins are a bit more balanced when it came to the rushing attack and passing. But what plagued them last year was the inability to throw the football and simple passing schemes. Now, UCLA brings back the fullback, right? That's not a staple. It's not something you're going to see in any Chip Kelly offense. You're going to see a couple of tight ends. And while UCLA did make tight ends an advantage, despite having, not the biggest of household names, they don't have the Brock Bowers of the world, but they made what they had work and turned walk-ons into scholarship guys and very productive outputs from tight ends, which this year is a thin position because of injuries and graduation and what may have you, even though Matavao is primed for a breakout year, award watch list for the John Mackey Award. Okay, so you look at a team that's bringing back its starting quarterback, a running back, another running back in the transfer portal, stacked at the running back position, where if Atkins can be healthy, Anthony Atkins, coming from the service academy schools, knowing how to run the triple option, could be a good fullback option if he's ready to go. He's been battling some injuries. UCLA piling up on the amount of running backs that they can have for just running back depth and fullback depth, and just to make something new happen. Because UCLA will lean a little more this year with a passing threat than they have in years past. Now, you're not going to have Patrick Mahomes back there firing passes, 1 foot flicking it to the end zone 70 yards on a dime, or no-look passes or whatever may have you, but a veteran quarterback at the right time with a team that is learning a new complicated scheme. And what did Logan Loya say best? It's a buffet. Everybody's going to feast. So this is a team ready to beat you with any weapon they have. A quarterback who, if kept upright, I believe will make so many better decisions than what Dante Moore did last year when he had the pick six bug. Pick six again and again against, all the interceptions, all the turnovers between the Washington State game, between the Oregon State, between Utah, all the interceptions and the bugs UCLA couldn't get through. That hopefully is not a thing for a quarterback that could complete close to 65-70% of his passes and had 11 touchdown to 3 interception ratio in limited time against tougher opponents and really charge the Bruins up. The same reception that Deshaun Foster got as the head coach being announced to the UCLA football team earlier this year after the quick hiring weekends was what Ethan Garbers is the leader in charge of this team as a player, as a quarterback, with what Eric Bieniemy can use. So a team that's going to have similar depth, hopefully more stability and a bit more depth on the offensive line with, while there have been some injuries, maybe that's allowed guys to get more reps and provide backups key opportunities to understand the schemes. And now UCLA doesn't have to rely on just 4 to 5 guys and completely crumble if there's any injury in the offensive line. That's not what it looks like this year, but they are a key to success for this UCLA team. So you've got a coach that's coached at the highest levels. If he can get any sort of protection, which Eric Bieniemy did not get for his quarterback last year at the Commanders, any sort of protection, and he'll have to be more creative. He's not facing NFL pass rushers, but there are going to be your elite pass rushers coming out, right? UCLA faced one at Utah last year. A couple years ago, there was one at USC. UCLA had one of their own in Lot 2. You're going to face those stout defenses.
No football, no NBA, no problem with FanDuel. With baseball, WNBA back soon, there's plenty to dive into over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Is there any point in betting on anyone in the AFC West besides the Chiefs? FanDuel has the Chiefs -230 to win the AFC West. If you want to bet on another team in that division, the Chargers are the next closest to the Chiefs at +350. The Raiders, they're 9-1, and the Broncos, well, they're just happy to be here. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
That we might have just missed that someone else won another huge position battle.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears.
We're getting the media out there to Baylor football practices. We're starting to see who's lining up with the ones, who's lining up with the twos, and everything in between. And I was told from someone who's at the practices, I can't make them. They're during the Matt Mosley show, so I'm on the air. And someone had mentioned, I think it was Ricky Thompson, had mentioned it in that interview I was referencing in yesterday's show, that the #1 running back reps have not gone to Dominic Richardson like they did last year. They are not going to Richard Reese, who was the #1 running back the year before, but rather Dawson Pendergrass is out there with the ones as RB1 of this Baylor football team in 2024. The guy who was impressive as a true freshman last year, It seems to be a theme at that position. The last 2 years, Baylor's had really impressive true freshman running backs. And it might be that Dawson Pendergrass is actually the best fit to get the most carries in this Jake Spavital offense. And let's be clear, as much as we like the other two guys that I mentioned, Dawson Pendergrass was the most productive back that Baylor had last year. Had 79 carries for 338 yards. 338, not a huge number. Only averaged 4 yards a carry. It's not bad for a true freshman. Don't get me wrong. 5 touchdowns, led the team. But make no mistake about it. If you watch the games and you were out and you were like me and most of you everydayers and suffering through a lot of this season, one of the bright spots of this offense was Dawson Pendergrass. He's big. He can bounce off tackles. He's got some sneaky speed. He added some pass catching, which we didn't see from him in high school. That was not part of the scouting report necessarily on Dawson Pendergrass, but he became a dual threat back out of the backfield for this Bears offense, which proves to fit his game a lot better this year. And Dawson Pendergrass did talk about the 2023 season this week and specifically what it meant to him and the other running backs. And man, you can feel the hurt in his voice a little bit when he talks here.
How much of an intensity jump has this season and this fall been compared to last fall?
It's been noticeable, yeah. I feel like last year we really didn't have this chip on our shoulder as we do this year. It was really embarrassing going like 3-9. You got to like walk around campus. It's kind of like hurt your confidence a little. But I know none of us want to go through that again. So I mean, we all got that chip on our shoulder, and I think that's just what keeps us moving.
It was really embarrassing. That speaks volumes, right? We know these kids weren't proud of 3-9. We know there's only so much they can say, and part of that is they're a good group of kids that are on the football team. But you don't hear it laid out plainly like that. They say, it's not the season we wanted last year. It was tough, or we're trying to put it in the rearview mirror. Dawson Pendergrass said, yeah, we were embarrassed. 3-9. We know what the record was. And we got to go around campus and see our friends and in class and in extracurricular activities, whatever that may be. And you've got to wear that every week. You know that everyone in the class was watching you guys lose by a lot. So I like that he was out there and straightforward with it. And I think he really factors in to be a big reason why they could turn this around. And this Jake Spavital offense will have a lot of ball carriers in it. But when you're looking at the attributes that he brings, that Dawson Pendergrass brings, and you compare it to this style of offense that we've seen in the past, I can't help but see a little Lake Seastrunk in there. A guy who is tough to bring down with arm tackles. While he might not look like it coming off the bus, he's a tough guy to bring down. He's got that speed, some sneaky speed. He is shifty. And I think, we didn't see Lake catch a lot of passes. We didn't see that wasn't a big part of that Bryles offense. I don't know how much it factors into Spavital, but it's an extra wrinkle that Dawson Pendergrass can bring you after year one. And I'm telling you, you saw this kid, and we're not big football scouts or anything, but you saw the kid's shiftiness last year, and it felt like, I don't know, maturity is not the right word, but it just felt like he'd been playing the college game before. He didn't seem too jittery. He wasn't making the wrong cuts. He wasn't avoiding contact. He seemed like he knew what he was doing every time down there. And that's why he was such a big part of whatever little success the Bears had last year. And it just did not look like a true freshman out there. Richard Reese, for the most part of his freshman year, did not look like a true freshman out there. There were times where towards the end of the season, he might not have been making the right cuts, and it looked like he had taken a lot of hits. But you just saw a guy in Reese in 22 and Pendergrass in 23 that was like, this guy looks like he's been playing a couple years at this level of college football. And to that end, I guess it's not a huge surprise that Dawson Pendergrass is taking RB1 snaps. But I'm not going to lie to you. I was surprised by it. I just laid out all the reasons why you shouldn't be surprised and why I guess I'm not in hindsight. But, I mean, we all saw Richard Reese in 2022. And it seems like he's going to be more of a focal point in this offense. We all saw Dominic Richardson at Oklahoma State, and we saw the scouting report coming in, and I was amongst the people saying, here we go. You've got your Abram Smith guy that you were missing in 22. You've got him in 23 with Dominic Richardson. But you didn't have that. And you didn't have a lot of Richard Reason on the field. And certainly not on the backfield. You saw his flashes again in special teams towards the end of the season, but in terms of the running game, the bright spot was Dawson Pendergrass. And now, after laying all that out, I, like some of you, are like, yeah, maybe we should have thought it was Dawson Pendergrass. Maybe we just don't overthink this. But I see a power and speed combo that, first off, I wasn't expecting. I saw, all his tape and his scouting reports in high school. I didn't see his game live, so that was probably a big difference. But I did not expect that speed-power combo that it looks like we're going to get from Dawson Pendergrass in 2024, just like we got in the doses that we saw of him in 2023.
GameTime makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the GameTime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code LOCKEDON. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase with GameTime. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
So at one end of the spectrum of the Mountain West, you have New Mexico. Poor New Mexico. Their win total, so is Nevada's 2.5. Somebody's got to go over. I mean, Bronco Mendenhall is down there in New Mexico now. Can they really? They're 131st in S&P Plus. Yikes. That's a major yikes. Games to watch for the Lobos real quick. Montana State week 1. If they lose that one, 0-12 could be in store. Air Force could be more winnable than you think. At Utah State, at Hawaii. Those are the only games that could be winnable. I don't think they're winning all of them. I would honestly take New Mexico under 2.5, which means you should probably take Nevada over 2.5. But Boise State is the team that gets more attention in the Mountain West. Why? Well, because they are the heavy preseason favorites. And I think for Boise State, their schedule comes down to a couple of games, but their ability to make a postseason push into the college football playoff, it's very real. It's very real. And think about this. Here's something that Boise State 100% has working in their favor. The 12-team college football playoff is more expansive. There's a G5 auto bid in there. But the auto bid is not automatically going to the winner of the Mountain West. It could be Conference USA champion. It could be Sun Belt champion. It could be American champion. These are all options. So what Boise State has working in their favor is their brand. If you are the 12-team selection committee and you are making a subjective choice on which group of 5 team to rank the highest, I mean, you kind of had the Liberty audition last year. It didn't go particularly well when they had a weak schedule. They have a weak schedule again. What if they go undefeated? Well, saw that last year. Would they put him in? Maybe. But who's running college football? Who makes a lot of decisions? What drives a lot of decisions in college football? Television. Television does. I still believe, perhaps I'm wrong, but I still believe that Boise State has got the strongest group of 5 Cinderella cachet from that 07 Fiesta Bowl win. You just can't overlook the importance of that game for the Boise State football program. Put them on the map in a meaningful way. I mean, to go toe-to-toe with Oklahoma when they were good with Bob Stoops, it's no small thing. Adrian Peterson was on the other side. Boise State was on one side, and Adrian Peterson lost. People remember that sort of stuff. So if you're thinking about which group of 5 team do you want to put in, who's more recognizable? Who's a more perennially, nationally recognizable brand? It's Boise State. It is absolutely Boise State. The blue turf, the uniforms, the teams, the upset, the trick plays, all that sort of stuff. I think it's still really powerful. I'm not saying it's the only factor that'll go into it, right? A 3-loss Boise State team, probably not going to be the highest ranked group of 5 conference champion. I think you can get a 2-loss out of the American, which is a strong league, whether that's Memphis or Tulane. UTSA could make a push in there. Watch for South Florida, perhaps. And then you could get a team out of the Sun Belt like James Madison, or somebody out of Conference USA like Liberty that goes undefeated. New Mexico State's been really good. I don't think New Mexico State will do it, but Liberty could. At least that's how Vegas sees it, is that they have the best chance to go undefeated of any team in college football, including Georgia. Crazy times. So Boise State, I think, ends up at 10-2 or 9-3. They've got a toss-up game in here. I reserve the right going into the season to have a game on the schedule as a toss-up. I'll make a pick the week of the game, but I've got it as a toss-up. Georgia Southern is not that game. That's the week 1 matchup. Look, Nebraska once lost to Georgia Southern, so you can't take them lightly at the very least. Like, you can't just roll to Georgia Southern and think, oh, this is going to be super easy. Clay Helton's a head coach down there. He wasn't great at USC. He wasn't completely terrible until the end. Then it got completely terrible, but I'm just saying, you're on the road week 1 against a decently competent, at least. I can't say I know a lot about Georgia Southern this year. Haven't done a segment on them here on the show, but I'm just saying, Boise State, don't overlook that game automatically. Week 2 at Oregon. Boise State 3-0 all time against Oregon. That ends at Autzen Stadium. That's a loss. Portland State, that's a win. Washington State at home, big game there. Big game there. Cougs, not a Mountain West team, but playing a lot of Mountain West schools. They're going to be solid. We're talking about them tomorrow on the show. Can't overlook that one, but at home, I think Boise State wins. Utah State the following week. Better roster, better team. Boise State's S&P Plus this year, which is a combined metric of a variety of factors, including recent recruiting rankings and returning production, which is a good metric to look at where your roster should be on paper. Doesn't mean it translates onto the field automatically. On paper, though, Boise State has the best roster in the Mountain West. I mean, top 40 nationally, pretty darn good for a group of 5. Utah State should be a win. At Hawaii, that should be a win. Long trip. I don't think Hawaii's bad. I think they should, or at least will have the opportunity to be a little bit better than last year, but don't think they're at Boise State's level yet. Then comes the toss-up game. This is one of the biggest games on the Mountain West schedule all season long. Heck, if I'm able to, I live a 2.5-hour drive from Las Vegas. I might go to UNLV and check out Boise State at UNLV. That's going to be a pivotal game in the Mountain West this year. Barry Odom's got the guys cooking. That's a toss-up to me. Those are 2 of the 3 top teams in the Mountain West. I think Fresno State is in that mix as well. I wouldn't be surprised if you see someone rise up like a Wyoming or a Colorado State, perhaps. But man, I tell you what, Boise State at UNLV, gosh, that's going to be a fun game. So that's a toss-up. San Diego State at home, win. Nevada at home, easy win. At San Jose State, I think that's a win. At Wyoming, last week of the regular season, tough environment, coaching change over there. I thought about it. Nobody's perfect. Even the conference favorite. Right now, I'm taking Boise State to lose at Wyoming last week of the regular season. So that's how I get to 10-2 or 9-3. The other game I could see Boise State dropping is Washington State. I think that they've got Oregon State, the last week of the regular season. Wyoming is second to last week. Between Washington State, Wyoming, and Oregon State, I think Boise State's going 2-1. They're capable of going 3-0. I think 2-1 is more likely than 1-2. I think 3-0 is more likely than 1-2. Winning all 3 of those games, not easy though. Oregon State and Washington State are at home. I'll take those as wins, and the Wyoming is a loss. I could see any of those getting flipped. So Boise State 10-2 or 9-3. Now, let's say they go 10-2, they win the Mountain West Championship, and they're 11-2. Does that get you in with a loss to Oregon and let's say They beat UNLV, beat Wazoo and Oregon State, but lose to Wyoming exactly as I'm predicting it to go. Does that make you the highest ranked Group of 5 champion? Not automatically. You have to go undefeated for that to happen, and that won't take place because I don't think they can go into Eugene and beat Oregon again. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I seriously doubt it. But if they have just the one loss to Oregon, they beat everybody else, I think that locks it up. So this campaign for Boise State, to be the highest ranked Group of 5 conference champion, to get in, the brand power is working in their favor. When you get down to a subjective debate of do we want this Group of 5 or do we want that Group of 5, the schedule, I think, has enough quality opponents on it. Having Washington State and Oregon State both on there, I think that's good. I think that's really, really good for the Broncos. This is why that alliance works out. It strengthens their schedule. You win both those games, I think that's worth more than just a regular Mountain West win. But watch for that game at UNLV in the middle of the season.